That's your boy Gooch.
That is, of course, Keys.
And this is the RogueHead Huddle presented by RGR Football. Gooch?
Appreciate you all for checking us out this Friday. Hope you're having a great day. Go back and check some of our previous shows. I believe you'll like them. Become a member. Check out the RGR store. Join the live stream. Keys and I and Aaron are usually in the chat. There is Chief in the North on Thursday and everything else that RGR has to offer. Take this walk with us, guys.
I'm not here to bash Veach, but we are going to be a little critical here. So I'm going to ask this question. Has Veach gotten good enough value out of his first rounders? And I made sure to put in there both the picks and the trades. All right. John Dorsey traded 2017 first rounder to move up and our 2018 first rounder to move up so we could draft Pat. So Veach was working without a 2018 first round pick, but our first pick in 2018 is what is now the notoriously known as the Breland Speaks pick. And so we picked him at number 46 with the first pick that we had. And I'm going to throw out some names of players that were available that were drafted after Breland Speaks here. Okay, Dallas Goedert, Jesse Bates, safety for the Bengals, who I would actually like to see us go after if he is allowed to hit free agency.
He is a free agent.
He is, yeah, but they could re-sign him or franchise tag him. So, but if he actually makes it to free agency, I would love to see us go after him. DJ Shark, Carlton Davis. So, even with those, I mean, I've named some players that I would like to have on this team. Imagine DJ Shark. I don't even know that Breland Speaks is in the NFL anymore.
I don't think he is.
So, I mean, there's a lot there that we could have had, even in the second round, even, with Veach now having a first rounder 2018. 2019, of course, we trade our first rounder to Seattle for Frank Clark. Seattle takes LJ Collier. And I'm just going to give you guys some names of players that were available after that pick.
Before he does that, I want you guys to know Veach traded a first round pick for an average of 6.5 sacks and 29 tackles a year. I just want to put it out there, just so you know, before you go, oh yeah, Frank, he helped us to the Super Bowl, which you know what he did, which has been his most productive year, but over average, 6.5 sacks, 29 tackles a year.
I have
I
it.
mean, if we're really going to get into it, those are Dan Sorensen numbers.
I have it on good authority from the Save Our Chiefs guys that Gooch wakes up every night in the middle of the night screaming those stats.
And that's not fake news or a hit piece, guys. These are facts.
All right, let's go over some names of who we could have had instead of Frank Clark in Kansas City. All right, well, the guy that was drafted right after him, we have in Kansas City, and DeAndre Baker. Pick number 33 was Byron Murphy. Pick 34 was Rock Ya-Sin. Pick 36 was Deebo Samuel. Pick 39 was Sean Bunting. Pick 44, Elgin Jenkins. Pick 46 is Greedy Williams. So, I mean...
please understand that during that draft, I still wanted Greedy. I wanted them to trade for Greedy. That guy,
right.
He's not doing nothing in Cleveland, but that's because they don't know how to use him. But Greedy is a stud corner. Stud corner. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nope, perfectly fine. So, that's just an idea of players that we could have drafted in 2019. And as Gooch would tell you, and we wouldn't have thrown away 100 and whatever million dollars that we could have then allocated elsewhere. 2020, we actually had our first round pick, the one and only first round pick Brett Veach has had, or kept, rather, and we took Clyde Edwards Hilaire. We could have taken very next pick T. Higgins. Very next pick after that, Michael Pittman Jr. Very next pick after that, DeAndre Swift. Um, few more picks after that, number 41, Jonathan Taylor. And yeah.
In Trayvon Diggs in this class too?
Um, we also have Antoine Smith, or sorry, Antoine Winfield Jr., number 45. We do have Trayvon Diggs at number 51, so we could add Trayvon Diggs. I could have Chase Claypool, 49. Cam Akers, 52. J.K. Dobbins at 55. Van Jefferson, 57. And Christian Fulton at number 61. So there's a lot of guys we could have traded back, gotten more picks. We could have actually possibly ended up with two of these from this list I just read. Instead, we got Clyde Edwards Hilaire. And then, of course, this last year, we traded our first for Orlando Brown Jr. And I'm not going to read a long list of guys that we could have got there. This draft is fresh enough that you guys still know. Uh, but we could have definitely used the guy that the Ravens ended up drafting with the pick we gave him, which was Jason Owa. And so, I mean, he could have been a fairly fun player in our defense. So, anyway, all of that to say, or to answer this question, has Veach gotten good enough value out of his first rounders? What do you think, Gooch?
I'm gonna have to say that's negative, Ghost Rider. Yeah, I mean, there's really no way to spin it. Like when you look at all the names that we, first of all, as fans, this is really all this is. We're not critiquing, but there's not a single one of you Chiefs fans out there that could go down that list of names and go, man, we could have had him instead of Clyde. Like, was Damien really that bad that we needed to let him walk? Um, these are all, and smarter men than us make those decisions. But as we look at it, like I would have kept. You can't preach keep the nucleus and you let go a big part of your running back room and part of the reason why you won the Super Bowl, go to Chicago. Yes, he didn't do well, but Matt Nagy is not Andy Reid. You know what I'm saying? Just like Brian Flores is not Bill Belichick. Great coaches, but there's levels in this game. You know what I'm saying? And knowing how to use your personnel. And I think when Veach went to Reed and said he reminds me of Brian Westbrook, Reed likes to side with his guys. I don't want to call him an enabler because that would be disrespectful, and we're not trying to do that here. But I think in this instance, because Veach was Patrick 2 years ago when he came to Reed with, "Hey, check out this kid." I think he had a little more benefit of the doubt than not because I firmly believe, and I actually went back and looked, and I don't think Reed ever picked a running back in the first round in 20 years of coaching. I don't even think Shady was a first round pick. Um, so just kind of, I mean, it's the synopsis. I'm gonna get that out of the way. No, we haven't got enough value unless you count Patrick as one of Veach's picks, even though Dorsey made it because Veach was 1 pound on the pavement for him. But we haven't got enough, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective on Veach and Reed. Um, I don't see him saying, because he didn't just say, by his own words, he didn't just say, yeah, I can see that comp. I see what you're talking about. He went back to Veach and said, no, he's even better than Westbrook, having watched the film. Um, And, and the thing is, and we're talking about this, but that's two guys, right? That's a guy who's been a head coach for 20 some years now and has seen a lot of players. And Veach and his scouting staff, like they were all super high on him. And then you throw in, Pat as well. Um, yeah, you know, I think in all of life, your strengths are also, your weaknesses as well. And so, I want to be as fair as I can to Veach in this because he's an aggressive guy. He sees a need. He's aggressive in filling those needs, uh, which is better than being completely passive when you see a need and not filling it. Kind of watch from afar and watch Chris Ballard work with the Colts, and hold on to all that cap space that he had when he could have really filled out that roster. And the Colts, could have made a deep push in the playoffs, out of one of the last 2 years. But Ballard wasn't really out there, bringing guys in. So, um, it goes both ways. Again, what is a strength can also be a weakness. It just depends. At some point, every strength becomes a weakness. And in this case, if you're taking a lot of home run cuts, you're going to strike out too. Um, in this case, maybe you shouldn't be taking a home run cut with the bases loaded and no one out and your pitcher up next and you're in the bottom of the ninth down by a run or two. Um, I hated that we drafted a running back when it happened. I hated it because I was right there with Ryan. Value wise, it's dumb. It's absolutely stupid to do. And I think maybe it was Dan who added on. If you take a first round running back, it better be a generational guy. And now I understand that if it is a generational guy, then you look like a genius because you have that 5th year option, right? To where you basically have the running back for the length of his career for the most part. Running backs are generally only good 4 or 5 years. You get a guy with a 5th year option. In a sense, I'm okay with them taking a a general running back at 32 because it's kind of semantics to that point, right? One pick later and you're in the second round. So, first round running back versus second round running back really doesn't matter a whole lot, right? DeAndre Swift was, I believe I said, the next pick taken after Clyde, I think in the list as I was reading that off. Oh, no, he was 3 picks later. It's T. Higgins, Michael Pittman Jr., and then DeAndre Swift. So, what difference does 3 more picks, make? The Lions had a heck of a lot more holes in their roster, and they were taking a running back 3 picks later than a team that just won the Super Bowl. And at least we were getting a 5th year option on the running back. The Lions wasted 2 years of Swift now on a disastrous team, and they're either going to offer him a contract extension at some point that he'll never live up to because that's just the longevity of the position, or they're basically going to waste his 4 year contract with the Lions and never really see anything come out of it. So like I want to be as fair as possible to Veach with this. I mean, there's parts of it that are absolutely stupid, and there's parts that make sense. And so, maybe the part that makes sense, Clyde's floor was high enough, and as Seth and others have pointed out, part of it is definitely that the Chiefs have not utilized him properly. That part is true. But as I argued earlier, part of it is also that even if that was true when they drafted him, the way defenses are playing us, we now need a different running back. And so, it's hard. We're looking at this with hindsight, right? And so we can look back at each of these players, but it at least does caution that, Veach needs to, and his scouts need to think about their scouting of players, whether professional scouting of players or prospect scouting. Um, and maybe, just maybe, part of the problem is that they thought that the issues with players like Frank Clark and others was that they just needed better coaching. And maybe our coaches were too cocky and full of themselves that they thought that they can turn anything into lemonade. Well, I got news for you. Sometimes it's not lemons that life gives you, it's urine. And you can't turn that into lemonade. If you want to try it, you go right ahead, but I'm not tasting it.
And for those of you who never watched me and Keys before, when we're discussing generational running backs and why you don't choose one at running back in the first round, when we say generational, we mean Barry, Saquon, Christian McCaffrey, actual guys that would change the position.
Right. Yeah. Derrick Henry, obviously. A- And but even then,
I
Derrick
forgot Henry.
Henry's what, his first and second year, he kind of had a slow start. And if I remember correctly, that first year or two, like, people were throwing out the bus label. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the crapshoot of the running back position, and it's one of the reasons that you don't draft a running back in the first round. We got Jamal Charles in the third round. Priest Holmes, who had perhaps one of the all-time 5 or 10 top seasons or 2 seasons together with the Chiefs, was an undrafted free agent. And so you don't have to spend a first round to get a running back. Now, clearly, if you get it down to science where you can get one of these guys in the second round, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, if you knew with hindsight that Derrick Henry was going to be what Derrick Henry is, or Jonathan Taylor was going to be what Jonathan Taylor is, or Adrian Peterson was going to be what Adrian Peterson was, or LaDainian Tomlinson, um, and you can go on to list these guys, Nick Chubb, whatever. Of course, you'd like to have that fifth year option, right? Because it's going to save you some money, and you don't want to have to pay a second contract to a running back because things go downhill from there. Um, but all of that said, and we've only talked about the one. We've I guess we talked a little bit about Frank. I mean, there's clearly players I would have rather had on this team rather than Frank. Players that would have made bigger contributions, even with the contribution that Frank made. Uh, you know, People say, well, without Frank's attitude, without Frank in the playoffs, guess what? One, we would have had a different player. We could have had someone like Debo Samuels. But two, we also would have had an extra 20, $25 million a year to play with. We could have been signing someone in free agency. So you can't just say it's Frank or a draft pick because that's not how it worked. We gave up a draft pick for Frank, and then we gave up a boatload of money. Frank has been like the second highest paid player on this defense. First, second, third, right there. The whole time he's been a Chief. So we could have had other players on this defense. We could have paid someone else. Imagine imagine how many players that you can have on a defense with a 25 million dollar cap hit. You could basically have any free agent defender out there. at any point over the last 2 or 3 years. With that kind of cap hit, we could have possibly had two of those guys on this team. So it's not like it's a one for one substitution, Frank or nothing. Okay, we don't know what would have happened either way. Um,
And I'd just like to point out for those of you who think that Frank won us that Super Bowl, I actually believe that Chris Jones' back-to-back batted down passes and Kimba Fuller's interception won us that Super Bowl. That's just my take on it.
right. Yeah, and maybe we don't let players walk. Maybe we don't trade D Ford. Maybe we don't get rid of Justin Houston. I mean, who knows? If we don't, there's all kinds of alternate paths out there to what Veach could have did, and we'll get to that here in a second. Um, I'm not 100% sold on Orlando Brown Jr. Um, clearly Veach was right on with his first choice in free agency of Trent Williams. And it really sucks that he wasn't able to get that done because, again, that's the difference. You get Trent Williams and you're paying the guy. Okay, possibly what we're going to have to offer Orlando Brown now, except for we gave up a first to get him that, we could have used on a player. And so that one really stings. But, Veach's first choice was right. And so it's hard for me to fault him for that. Um, the thing is, though, when you give up that first, you're committing to this guy basically to be your left tackle. I mean, you got to keep him around when you give up a first round pick. And of course, we got to be careful with that because again, you fall in the trap of spin cost fallacy. Um, so I think overall, I'm gonna say no. Veach hasn't gotten enough value out of his first rounders. Um, that said, late first round picks, it's hard to get value for them. So maybe that balances things in his favor. But at the same time, it hasn't just been those picks. We've been giving up those picks. We've basically been, doing what the Rams did, but for worse players. We've been giving up those picks for the right to give a guy a huge contract. And, I think that's the biggest problem with it is that we were paying a first round pick to give guys big contracts. It's not like, we were making decent deals here. And I also think that when you have a quarterback who's getting paid like Patrick is and how they knew he was going to be, having that fifth year option each year, providing you some cost control is a big, big, big thing in roster building.
We're going to catch you in the next one, but I want to leave you guys, which is something we've never done before. So this is even a new one for Keith. One thing about the huddle, I don't know if you guys ever really knew this, is that a lot of times a lot of our questions are thought out, and Keys kind of fires them at me, and you get really kind of real good, nice, thought out answers from both of us, but mine are more off the cuff. So I'm going to throw one of Keys. At the end of that, you were talking about the running back room and the receiver room, and Veach saying that he was going to build the defensive line was the priority. I remember all that. Now, I'm going to ask you, how much of that do you believe? Because there is an Alabama receiver that was hurt just this year that Veach absolutely loves, and there's a good chance he falls to us in the first round. So, one, does he jump at that receiver, or do you think he's really going to go defensive line with the first pick?
I don't think that we can say one way or the other what direction they're going to go with their first pick. I think if anyone tells you they know, that person is a liar. It's really going to depend on as they put their board together And again, free agency is going to influence a lot of this too, right? Free agency is a month and a half before the draft. So that's going to factor in. What are they able to do in free agency? Because that's going to influence what they do in the draft. They might get a starter tier receiver or a starter tier, defensive player, at the top position on the defensive line. We really don't know. And so I think that that's important and whatever happens that way. But I will say, um, I know who you're talking about, and I don't think it matters who the receiver is. Again, and we already discussed this with the Josh Gordon pick, or signing. We've talked about it, I think, probably in the past with McCole Hardman. Um, this offense is notoriously hard for receivers. So if you draft a receiver this year, you're drafting him not to play or contribute significantly this next season, the 2022 season. You're drafting him to contribute starting in the 2023 season if he's a really smart, hardworking receiver, possibly the 2024 season. And that's not to say that Veach wouldn't do that, because a lot of times, and that's something I didn't mention, but that is part of his strategy. Is he does like to look ahead and fill holes for, a year or two down the road, because when you do that, you save yourself from having to spend a bunch of money in free agency. If you can anticipate those holes and those areas of need, it's not really much about anticipating. You just look at your roster and see when guys' contracts are expiring. But when you do that, you know, you set yourself up. But at the same time, it's give and take, because if you're looking a year or two down the road, then you're not filling holes on your roster right now. Where I think you do that at is if the players that look to be valuable that you have, graded around your pick, you know, late first round, if those players, if you project them to come in and start right away, then, you're probably going to take one of those players. It's probably not going to be a receiver, though, right? Just because of the nature of the position in this scheme. It's probably going to be a defensive player. But regardless of who the player is, if you don't project them to start this year anyway, think of a Josh Kando. If that's the, you know, if for whatever reason that's the player, the type of, we're not saying complete project, but if the player that's valuable in that pocket, or the player is valuable, you don't see them as contributing to next year's roster, then sure, maybe you do consider, okay, we'll go ahead and try to fill a hole for the following year. This is the best player at that position that's in our pocket, or whatever, something like that. And so I wouldn't say either, because I think we have to revisit this after free agency and a lot closer to the draft. And even then, it's still a crapshoot, right? Because you never know what Veach is going to do.
All right, so I hope we left y'all with some good stuff today. We appreciate anybody that watches this content, whether religiously or in passing. Go back, check out all the other RGR content, previous videos from us on the Huddle. Become a member. If you do become a member, join the Discord. Me and Keys are on the Discord. We're also on Twitter, and we answer any questions that you may have for us. Hit the RGR merchandise store, get you a hoodie, get you a mug. Keep a lookout for us. We have Chief in the North on Thursdays with Seth Kaiser. We've got live streams on Mondays. Dan has film breakdown. But above all else, make sure you tell somebody you love them. Again, tell somebody you love them. Check us out. Twitter, Discord. Send us a message in the chat or in the comments. We will answer your questions on the next one. We always this is the kind of stuff that we love to do. So keep in touch, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Peace out, guys.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.